MKUltra, also called the CIA Mind Control Program, is the codename given to the program of experiments on the citizens of America that were designed and undertaken by the CIA, which were illegal at the time and still are. Join us as we discuss the weird and terrifying world of MKUltra and other CIA experiments. Hey guys, I'm Sai. Welcome to Ace Podcast Nation, the channel which features podcast series on all sorts of subjects. We've got shows and series on mental health, football, films, TV, wrestling, music, serial killers, and more, including a brand new series, the Andy Campbell Championship Show, which will be recording its first episode, or when this comes out, we'll have already released the first episode, where myself and former Premier League and Championship striker Andy Campbell will review all the championship results, news, and rumours for the week. And I'm very happy to have Andy on board full time every week. It's going to be a good laugh. He's got a similar sense of humour to me, nice and dry, and he likes a good laugh. And we'll have a go through the football. And so we have new guests every week. We have 3 shows every week, released Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So be sure to check them out. All our shows are available in video format at youtube.com/AcePodcastNation. All our audio versions are available at the usual podcasting platforms. Join us on facebook.com/AceCastNation and join the 7.3 thousand followers. Get involved, leave us a comment. Tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like. And join me today as we go down the rabbit hole of paranoia and secrecy is my co-host Rhys Pycroft. Welcome, buddy.
Hi, Si. You all right, mate?
Yeah, it seems like ages, mate, since we've recorded one of these.
It has been a while. Well,
but it's been like a week. Well, it's probably been 2, haven't it? Because we missed one. First one we've missed. So luckily I've got plenty of shows. But back to normal now, the weekly conspiracy theory shows. So, a little disclaimer as usual, before we head down the terrifying and weird road to conspiracy theories, we want to point out that just because we discuss a particular theory does not mean that we believe it to be true, agree with the points of view, or in any way think that that is how it went down. We are simply going to discuss the popular theories and the evidence presented by the people who champion them. However, saying all that, MKUltra is not, it is a conspiracy theory, but it's kind of not, because a lot of the stuff was declassified and a lot of it's factual. So, but still, mind control.
Yeah, but come on, it's still going on, let's be fair.
Oh, fuck no, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Stop.
So, before we go into MKUltra, there's another CIA project, which is Project Artichoke, also referred to as Operation Artichoke, was a CIA project that researched interrogation methods. So it basically proceeded Project Bluebird and Artichoke officially arose in August of 1951, was part of the CIA's Office of Scientific Intelligence. The primary goal was to determine whether a person could involuntarily be made to perform an act of attempted assassination. So it's basically the like the Manchurian Candidate, which I think a big part of like this Project Artichoke and MKUltra is, I think that's the main achievement that they wanted, was to be able to sort of hypnotize or control just Joe Public or whoever, anyone they wanted to, someone's assistant.
Well, I do remember reading one of the specific experiments they carried out was if they could pull someone off the street, just, member of Joe Public, and within an hour have them hypnotized to go and crash a plane. Not saying nothing about 9/11 or anything, I'm just saying this was one of the experiments.
Oh, yeah, and like if you think, like if you could do that to people, you could, and what happens is as well, is when they come out of the trance, So when they achieve the target, they when you've shot whoever, Joe, when you've shot President Kennedy, say for instance, is when you as soon as that bullet is fired, or the 3 bullets are fired, that's when you come out of the trance, and then they can't remember it. And that's why it's not the JFK one, the other Kennedy, who was it Kennedy? Who was assassinated by Sirhan. What's his name?
Or it
But
was one of
yeah,
the other Kennedys, wasn't it?
yeah, I think it was. Yeah. So like basically, people reckon that he was like a Manchurian Candidate because
Have you ever
he.
been to a hypnotist show?
I have. I haven't. I've seen him like I'd seen one on holiday
Well,
before.
like I'd seen on holiday and telly and things like that, and I was still skeptical and didn't fully believe it. And I went to watch one down a local pub years ago, and like it involved people I knew. And the
Yeah.
things he was getting them doing that, 100% they would never ever do these things. But the hypnotist would like, he talked to a group of people and he was just looking and he went, it's not working with you, you go out the way. And he'd like pull him out the seat. And he'd be like, no, it's not working with you. But there was like, we couldn't see any difference or anything. And then all of a sudden he had them all doing all these kind of things. And I was like, that's absolutely mental. Because he did use a pendant or something to just swing it and
How was it?
hypnotize. And I was like, and it literally took 5-10 minutes, if that.
It is scary because, and like I know, like a lot of like hypnotism and like the stuff that like Darren Brown does, for instance, is to do with like subliminal messaging and stuff.
Yeah, Darren Brown
Um,
is a legend.
it makes you scary, like the stuff that you can do. And I do wonder sometimes, like, you know, are they just people kind of like plants and stuff just because like he did one where he got people to assassinate people and
I thought
they
that
went
until I
into a
saw him
theater.
live.
Oh, you saw Darren Brown live, do you?
Yeah, and what he did, he had basically like, like them ring frisbees. They've got like a hole and it's just a ring.
Yeah,
He'd like
he was
throw a
just throwing
sponge
it
over
out
them
to the
behind
crowd like.
the crowd. Someone would grab it, he'd go throw it again. And he wouldn't be looking at anything, throw it again, throw it again. And as he's in the air, he'd be like, oh, whoever catches it, come up to the stage. And it couldn't have been no more random. There's no
Yeah,
way they could have picked these people to do it. And they'd go up and every single thing he did work with every one of them. And there was one bit, we're watching him on the stage and he's doing a show and that. And then all of a sudden he goes, and I bet you didn't see the piano next to me. And right next to him was a woman playing a piano. And all of us were like, wow. None of us knew it was there. Like it was, I don't know
it's
how he done it. I
crazy.
mean, he's just amazing.
And that's the thing. So like, Robert Kennedy was killed by Sirhan.
Yeah.
Um, so the conspiracy theory with that in relation to what we're talking about is that he was psychologically programmed by unknown people to commit the murder, that he was not aware of his actions at the time, and that his mind was wiped in the aftermath by his conspirators, so that he would have no memory of it. He could give no evidence. He could not prove that any been programmed or anything like that. This theory is actually supported by a psychologist and hypnotist expert, Dr. Edward Simpson Callis, because after 35 hours of work with Sirhan in the prison in 1969, Sirhan claimed and has continued to claim that he has no memory of the assassination or the aftermath. Now, I'm sure people will say or would say that, it's just the adrenaline and the shock and the things like that, which would mean that he perhaps doesn't remember it. But like, if you see videos of this, like his demeanor afterwards, he does look like someone who's been hypnotized.
Yeah.
Like when they first come out with that hypnotism state, they like look really dazed and like what
Yeah.
they look like is, like how when say we were growing up, if you saw like a movie of someone on drugs or like tripping on LSD or something like
Yeah.
that, how people think people look
Yeah.
in like a movie rather than allegedly, so I've heard, what people look like when they've done those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know. it's weird, like, because, and a big part of Artichoke and MKUltra involves chemicals like LSD and amnesia and vulnerable states, which are brought on by drugs. And let's be frank, what they do is they break people, that they were breaking these people to try and manufacture like a split personality. That's what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
And like that in itself gets to me a lot, because having spoken to people recently who've got DID, and knowing that DID is caused by like severe trauma, I find it quite upsetting. Like, it's not nice anyway, even before, but having spoken to those people, I find it quite upsetting that like, a government was doing that to people just because they wanted to see what would happen, basically. So yeah, it's not good. And I still, remember sorry to jump around as usual. So remember a couple of weeks ago we were talking about like the places in Britain, and I couldn't remember of the place. There was like a place in Britain where they've done this like MKUltra sort of thing, and I was trying to think what it was. It's Tavistock.
I know.
And what they did, it basically did exactly the same kind of experiments and all that type of stuff. But I mean,
I'm sure there's been.
It's called the Tavistock Institute.
I'm sure there's been evidence found that they were doing these experiments back in 1910, trying to force split personalities.
Oh, I bet you they were, mate.
I think that was one of the first ones, was trying to force a split personality.
Yeah, but the thing is with those, is like there was no like boards to like
govern it,
govern it and regulate what these medical people were doing for the good of science and all this sort of shit. And don't get me wrong, like, I'm not naive. We wouldn't have the medical advancements and the scientific advancements that we haven't got like now if people hadn't made sacrifices and people hadn't made done shady stuff to test all these different things. I get that. But what this CIA and the American government was doing with MKUltra and Artichoke is it was ungoverned, and it was using people who didn't know what they were getting into.
Yeah.
Now, to me, if they were doing it, but the people who were being tested on knew this is what they were trying to do, and they still wanted to do it, I wouldn't like frown. It's illegal. Okay, it is illegal.
I'm with you there. Volunteer is fine, but they'd have to be like psychologically assessed that they are a sound mind volunteers.
Yeah, but well, I would imagine they have to be. They'd want them to be completely sound mind to start with, because they need to be able to like break them, so they can just pull people off the street, don't they? Do you see what I mean?
Like, yeah, but they probably also want people who've got split personalities and things to try these experiments on as well.
Oh yeah, and
they can, easily control the personality or whatever it might be.
Yeah, it's scary, mate. And even now, mate, you know what they could do now, mate? Right? They could pull you in tomorrow on the under the Terrorism Act, and they could whisk you off to the Tavistock Institute, and they could do all this to you, and they'll be like, they would never need to. If it worked, they could put you back on the street and then just leave you until they wanted to trigger you. You'd go back to work and doing everything as you do, and then they'd phone you up or they do whatever they need to do to set the trigger. You'd go and do whatever they set you to do, and then you do it, and then that would be. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, even though there's governments and there's boards, and there's
people. As soon as that act was brought in, I knew the Terrorism Act wasn't just to protect us from terrorists. No way.
Of course it wasn't, and that's why what you had is you had 9/11, and then you had 7/7 close together, because everyone was so angry about all the terrorism. They're not paying attention to what those acts would never have got through They would never the like the Constitution in America and the democracy in the UK. People would never have agreed to it.
No.
Without 9/11 and without 7/7, because what 9/11 did is put the world, like everyone saw what happened, everyone saw those planes crashing, blah blah blah. But then what 7/7 did in the UK was brought it to your like doorstep.
Yeah.
And most people have been to London at least once, or they know people who've been to London. So like, it's do you know what I mean? And they would never have passed those acts, never, especially in the UK. Bastards. So, Project Artichoke, they basically what they did is a mind control program where they gathered information with the intelligence divisions of the Army, Navy, and Air Force, and the FBI. Like the FBI, technically, is supposed to be the people who stop these things, stops the CIA from doing stuff on American soil. And it was part of it. You know, and I know it was the 50s. But, yeah.
Like I say, I deeply believe these experiments and worse are still going on now, mate.
Oh, without doubt.
And it sounds horrible and things, but there's so many homeless people and things like that.
People they could just take off the street and no one would miss.
Well, they don't even have to whisk them away. They could put an offer in the job centre offering someone £40 a day. They'll turn up on the door.
Yeah, do you know how many people would volunteer for these tests if you offered £1,000 a day to do these like experiments? How many people register? I know people. I nearly did it myself a few years, about 10 years ago. Registered for experiments to get some extra cash.
I know loads of people who've done it, mate.
Especially who come up to Christmas and things like that. People do it all the time.
Yeah.
So you imagine if you were
enough,
like signed up.
I actually registered for one before Christmas last year, but I couldn't do it.
So you imagine, mate.
I couldn't do it because I only had one testicle.
Oh. There's a song about that, mate.
And then I never ever did it again.
Yeah, but you know what that is, mate, as well, right? Is that they could, if you would say you were on like a mailing list for that sort of thing, like different experiments and stuff which pay, and then they sent you one saying for 1 week you can earn £1,000 a day. You just got to be there for 24 hours a day for a week. You got to stay there for a week, and then they did this to you for a week. But at the start of the week, they don't tell you what they're doing, like in detail. They just kind of say, "Oh, it's like a psychological."
The government version.
Yeah, it's just like a psychological experiment. You're going to watch some things, listen to some things. We'll inject you with a sedative. You'd say yes. 99.9% of people would say yes because they need the money.
Do you know what the mad thing is?
Realizing.
Right, we both used to work for the civil department.
Yeah.
And can you remember I got onto quite a high managerial course there?
Yeah.
One of the tests that we had there, it was a psychological analysis test, and it was a series of, I think it was about 300-400 questions, and all they were was simple yes/no answers. And I'll never forget these two questions that came in a row. The first one was, have you been scuba diving? And then the next one was, have you ever wanted to kill your parents?
Such a weird
that was in a government management test. And at the end of it, because them two questions just struck in my mind. To be honest, I can't even remember any of the other questions apart from them two. And after it, I brought it up with one of the assessors. And they went, we put that question in and we speak to everyone about it after. I was the only person who answered yes. And they went, you were the only truly honest one here. They said, when you were a child, we can guarantee if you live with your parents, there has been a time when you have wished them dead. So that statement is a factual statement. And in a way, he's right. When your kids have probably said to you at some point, I wish you were dead. Mine are going to. All kids do. They don't know what they're doing or saying. But
yeah, they don't understand what it is. It's weird, isn't it? Weird question.
Simple yes/no answers. You didn't really have time to read the question. It was just get through them as fast as you can.
Yeah.
And it was like that. you give your truthful answers, and I did just go with it and I was just yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. It wasn't just hitting a button. I was reading a question, answering. But it was just the scuba diving one that went straight into have you ever wanted to kill your parents? And them two questions were just like, what the fuck? Why?
Smart that is, mate, isn't it?
And it's
Really
something to do
weird.
with the way we think and the way we analyze and all this. Because I went on there to do the one certain side of the course. I can't say what it is because they know where we were.
Yeah.
But the other side of the course was management and leadership, and they wanted me to switch to the management side. So it's obviously something to do with thought process, and I would guess some kind of manipulation because they wouldn't want someone forward thinking and outspoken in the managerial role.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, it's a weird one, isn't it?
So governments do it on all levels. I remember
Even just
reading, I'm talking about 3-4 years ago now, I saw this article somewhere that they'd invented breathable liquid. It was some kind of specialist saline solution you could basically submerge yourself in, but breathe through it.
okay.
And it didn't say the reasons why, only kind of give little hints. Imagine if they took you and it's not even torture because they're not really doing anything wrong. They're giving you a bath. But imagine they locked you in a tub and submerged you in water. You panic, you think it's water. You panic, you freak out. You think you're drowning, you're swallowing, you think you're not breathing. What? They leave you there for a few days. You could think you're dead, floating in
Yeah, you would,
whatever it might be. Your mind would go crazy. They pop the tub open. What state are you in? Imagine that.
Yeah,
They
it's
submerged
just
you in a tub. Would you think you could breathe in it?
no.
Think you're
You
dead,
would.
wouldn't you?
That would be enough
Panic.
to break a lot of people, mate, wouldn't it?
It'd break everyone. Who could they put in there who could rationally think, whoa, I'm breathing in this liquid? It's
Yeah,
not gonna happen.
yeah. And the thing is, you'd lose, like, you'd probably start to get confused by
Well,
what's
they
real
got
and
them
what's not,
sensory
because,
deprivation tanks, haven't they?
mm,
Imagine being in one of them full of liquid.
yeah,
That would so
you
they
would lose a grasp on what's real and what's not, wouldn't you? Because you'd expect your mind would expect to be drowning in the dark,
yeah.
but your body would keep breathing.
But your
But
body will probably
you'd
react
think
as if it's drowning in some way because there's liquid going in.
yeah, you'd still choke, wouldn't you? And like, it's like you can't just continually push things down your throat, can you? Like,
Yeah,
eventually you've got to empty it, like your throat out or whatever.
it's weird. But
Mm.
imagine whether it's true or not, I don't know. But just imagine that.
Yeah, it's a hell of a torture
That'd be
device.
the most ultimate torture ever. That
Mm.
would break anyone.
So what they used to do in these experiments is they used to use like LSD hypnosis, complete isolation in these tanks, and like psychological harassment for special interrogations. So on these human subjects, the first agents would use like cocaine, marijuana, heroin, peyote, mescaline. So like that on its own is like, whew. Then they'd increasingly start using LSD because they saw that as like a more promising to open up the mind to different things and to break the mind as well, because obviously that provided similar effects to a lot of those other drugs, but hallucinations, audio hallucinations and visual can it could be and also they were still trying to find the amnesia side of it as well, so they were experimenting on how to break the mind and the hypnotism bit and the psychological bit, but they also wanted people to forget. Now, I know you can do that with hypnotism, I think, to a certain extent, without being an expert in hypnotism, but I think that there's ways to recover those memories. And I think they
Yeah,
were
it's
looking for something where you could completely, like a mixture of hypnosis, mind control, and
yeah. There's
drugs.
a name for it, isn't there? Regressive therapy or something like that.
Mm, not 100%
I
sure,
can't
mate, to
remember
be honest.
exactly, but yeah, there's people who specialize in just that.
So one agent, because they used to do this to their own agents as well, unknowingly. So what they used to do from about 1952 is they started giving CIA agents who didn't know LSD to see how they react, see how people react when they don't know they've taken a hallucinogen. And in this one record, it says that during Project Artichoke, one agent was given enough LSD or given LSD for 77 days straight.
Fucking
So
hell.
like he just didn't come down. Now, if you speak to anyone who's sort of taken anything like magic mushrooms or LSD, the first thing they will tell you about how you feel is everyone has had like a bad sort of trip or a bad experience, even if it doesn't last long and they talk themselves out of it, or they feel all right once they've sort of settled. One of the biggest fears is that you're never going to come down.
Yeah. So I've heard.
Even though so I've heard, that's what I'm saying. So like 12 hours later, they come down and they feel relief and they feel, or whatever it may be. But like, can you imagine not knowing you've been given it and for 77 days straight? That is
How could you not?
unbelievable, mate. I can't think of anything worse.
Like, I've spoke to loads of people who've taken both magic mushrooms and LSD. And from what I can perceive from it, magic mushrooms is a lot more mellow than LSD. LSD totally fucks your mind up. Magic mushrooms.
Let me tell you something about that, mate. Let me just stop you there. I got a friend who took magic mushrooms when he was like about 14, 15.
Yeah.
And he got lost up the Garth on his own and has never quite recovered from that. It's like stayed with him forever and like proper like made him super paranoid and stuff like that. And he's never been able to get over it.
Think about it at that age though, but like what you're saying there, totally.
I know it's different for like a grown.
I know a lot more people who've been damaged by LSD than by magic.
God, yeah. Especially like
magic mushrooms. But again, it's the same as any drug out there. It's how much of you take of it, what type do you take of it,
and how the circumstances and everything.
And it's how your mind was when you took it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, bang on,
That's
mate.
the biggest part of it. I don't think drugs mess people up. I think we've all got something wrong with us anyway, and the drugs trigger it.
Yeah, and I think like my a friend of mine, different friend, said that like he like even now he really believes that like with drugs, some drugs, like some people are all right with some drugs and they're not with others, and he's just like him and this other guy, they just magic mushrooms was just not for them. Sorry, my miss, I just seen an arm come in the door and it's my missus reaching for the lighter. I just think, but like the thought of like not knowing that someone's given you that hallucinogen.
Imagine a paranoid
70 days, mate. Yeah, that would break. I would love to know what happened with that guy, because I know there was one CIA guy who got dosed unknowingly, and he jumped out a window. And his wife was fighting for years to have acknowledged that that's what happened, because he was dosed, freaked out, jumped out a window, died, and she lost her husband or whatever.
Yeah,
it's frightening. Me. They had no shame of like what they were doing. Particularly at that time. I'm not to say they've got any more shame now, but at that point they just did not care. They would just the CIA was actually sued because this he was a scientist. His name was Frank Olson, and the CIA were actually sued after it because obviously, as you would, his wife knew sort of what he was into and whatever. So the So the from what I just quickly flicking through it, his family claimed that either the CIA threw him from a window or he was dosed and jumped, because they said that there was no way he would have voluntarily done it.
The thing is now, like back then, we didn't have social media and internet and all that.
Yeah.
Totally, utterly believable. But you look at some of the suicides of certain people now and what people close to him say. There's no way he'd have done that.
Yeah, but then
This is
there's
just
like
me
that.
being devil's advocate, you
Yeah, of
know.
course. Well, look
Not
at that the Welsh MI5 guy a couple of years ago, who they found in a locked hotel room in a hodl, locked from the outside. But they say that he killed himself. A Welsh Gareth Williams, his name was, and he was an MI5, like worked for MI5.
yeah.
He was found in a locked hotel room. The room was wiped clean, prints. A hotel room now, which, how many people go through a hotel room, on a weekly basis? Thousands. Was in a black, like, gym bag. His body, like, in the inside, the bag was zipped up. He killed himself. And they said the media said it was a sex game gone wrong. And you can't tell me that that's not, like, something shady. Do you know what I mean?
Things like this you hear about all the time, don't you?
That's not in the 50s. That's in 2010.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, you look at them
He was working
Russians
for the
who were,
NSA.
look at the Russians who got poisoned.
Yeah.
How many of them people do they poison and it works and no one ever finds out? It's probably
Yeah.
going on a daily basis all over the world.
Scary, mate.
The human species is irrelevant to humans.
Yeah, they don't care who they hurt. Just they need to do what they need to do for whatever reason it is, isn't it?
Money and power.
Yeah, generally. But what I think as well is when they need to cover something up, it's easier for them to kill than to deal with the expose
Yeah,
or the whistleblower. So they just kill that person or they
yeah,
disappear them. And I find it, I find it really sad that the human race is like so. There's a large portion of the human race who are so blasé about human life that rather than their sort of greed be exposed and them lose like their money line or whatever you want to call it, their power trip, they're
yeah,
happy to just kill like innocent people, people who've got families and kids and just not bothered. Just, you're in my way, you're an obstacle, you're a problem, so that's the solution and that's the end of it.
yeah.
It's a sad reflection on the human race, unfortunately. So the CIA disputed that Project Artichoke was a real operation, and finally it was decided that an agent from the CIA research staff, a former US Army Brigadier General Paul F. Gaynor, would oversee it, and the CIA sought to establish control over what it perceived as weaker and less intelligent segments of society. And that's the other thing, is they view us underlings as less than. That's, and I think that's another reason why they find it so easy to, kidnap, experiment on, kill, whatever you want to say. They're happy to do because they view the Joe public as, not being on their level, should we say?
Yeah.
And they sort of moved on to using like people like defectors and sorry, I lost my place. Like defectors and refugees, prisoners of war, others, or even they were using, to say people were like interviewing for jobs with the CIA. They would use them. It's not great, is it? You know.
It's crazy.
And they moved it overseas as well. They did a lot of these experiments in Southeast Asia, Japan, the Philippines, because it was even easier for them to get away with in those countries, because they, who expects in 1950s, who was expecting the CIA and the American governments to be doing the experiments like that in those countries,
Yeah.
They established teams to manage it over, like operations abroad and all this sort of stuff, overseas bases, all this type of stuff. Especially, a lot of it was hidden behind military experiments for like aliens and stuff like that, so that people, or above them, people who might have objected. It was like what I would say is the equivalent now of national security. Like they use, that's their excuse, isn't it, for everything? Or it's national security. And I think back then it was probably to get people to stop asking questions. It was like, oh, we're looking into extraterrestrials or space and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, Project Artichoke pretty much morphed into, or led on to, whatever you want to say, into Project MKUltra, also called the CIA Mind Control Project or Program. It's the code. That's the MKUltra is the code name which was given to the program. And yeah, let's get into some of the like the nitty gritty, as they say. Experiments on humans were intended to identify and develop drugs and procedures that could be used in interrogations in order to weaken an individual, force confessions through mind control. The project was organized through, again, the Scientific Intelligence Department of the CIA, coordinated with the US Army Biological Warfare Laboratory. It was officially sanctioned in 1953. So you can see, I think Artichoke was 1951. You can see how they build up to them through different projects. They, like one's linking to the other. Oh, we've got this down, so now we're going to go into these experiments for these reasons. It was like what'd you say, like a...
They're just pushing the boundaries more and more and seeing how deeper and further they can go.
Oh, yeah. So it was sanctioned.
Science needs things like that, but not in ways like this.
Yeah, not in horrific ways like this.
And the thing is, when you say, like, if people volunteered for it, if they're willingly doing it,
that's one thing, isn't it? Even if
it's not really the experiment they want, is it? Yeah, willingly doing it is, that's not the experiment. Regardless of, they don't know what, they're going to be willingly doing, but they're willing to do it, so their mind is open to it anyway. They don't want to know that. They want to know, can I pull Joe Publican and make him do what I want?
Yeah. So it was officially sanctioned in 1953. It was reduced in sort of scope by 1964, and then further curtailed in 1967, and recorded to be halted in 1973, because basically the project was engaged in many illegal activities, including the use of US and Canadian citizens as unwilling test subjects, which led to controversy regarding its legitimacy. MKUltra used numerous methods to manipulate people's mental states and alter their brain functions, including surreptitiously administering drugs like LSD, other chemicals, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, isolation, and verbal and sexual abuse, and other forms of torture. It's like, what other forms of torture are there after all those things? It's crazy, mate. Crazy. It was done by a lot of, this wasn't, don't get me wrong, this wasn't just like a group of CIA rogue guys. This was being done in at least 80 institutions around the country, including colleges, universities, hospitals, prisons, pharmaceutical companies, as well as the CIA. They were just in charge.
Yeah.
This wasn't just like a shady group of small group of people doing it.
The mad thing is, that's
Thousands.
what's going on in these countries. Look at third world countries. They're probably doing these experiments on children and everything.
Oh God, I hate to think what they were doing. Do you know what I mean? Where they
Because
get
one there's
places where
stories floating about that the CIA do a lot of their experiments in other countries because of human law and such.
I wouldn't surprise me, mate. Especially
You go to like Rwanda, the Sudan,
countries where
places like
there's
that.
not so much law and
Yeah,
order. Do you know what I mean? It's I'll have a quick look now. But yeah, it's like where they can get away with it. You'd imagine that they were doing even worse stuff. Let's be
yeah.
fair.
There is no world law, is there?
No, and that it's there's a lot of. It's difficult to go into all of this within an hour because
Yeah,
there's so much, and I'm half tempted to call it and do it part 2 next week because there's so much. And maybe in part 2 we can go, into a bit more detail of certain cases. So like
I
today
think
we've
that'll
gone
be
into a
better
general thing, but
because that some of the
because
cases bring Rhys to other
harrowing,
things, like the Bobby
yeah,
Cake thing, and Bobby
yeah,
Kennedy.
yeah.
It
And
could
there's
bring Rhys to other things.
yeah, I agree. Yeah, so I think that's what we'll do. We'll keep it general today, and then next week we'll go full on into MKUltra and mind control and Manchurian candidates. There's plenty of sort of whistleblowers and people who say they were experimented on.
Yeah,
We'll go into that. So, like obviously we've touched on Project Artichoke and MKUltra. The other one I wanted to just go into to finish was the syphilis experiments
yeah.
they did, which obviously was just fucking horrific. And in some ways, not it's not as in some ways it's not as bad as what they did to human beings with MKUltra, because what they did was just fucking brutal. But so for people who don't know, the American government it was a study conducted between 1932 and 72, which is a long old time. It's called the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, and it's famous for being, or infamous for being, completely unethical clinical study, which basically was conducted by the US Public Health Service. The purpose of the study was to observe the natural history of untreated syphilis. So what they did is they gave African American men syphilis and didn't give them any treatment, and then observed them over a period as long as it took them to die, I guess, because like you're talking 1932 to 72 is 40 years.
Yeah.
40 years where they just literally, observed what syphilis would do. And it's not pretty, I don't think. So let's have a look. We've got this, and this experiment has had long, long-standing aftermath of issues for the people who were involved, because not so much, a lot of them died or have died since, but some of the younger ones have had to live with that, for God, Lord knows how long. So they formed a study group in 1932 at the National Health Service headquarters. Taliaferro Clark was credited with founding it, and his initial goal was to follow untreated syphilis in a group of black men for 6 to 9 months, and then follow up with a treatment phase. However, when he understood the intention of the other study members was to use deceptive practices, he disagreed with that plan to conduct the extended study, and he later retired after the study began because he obviously didn't agree with it. So good for him, I guess. But you know, they weren't going to be stopped by one person. I mean, let's be honest. In 1932, African Americans were second-class citizens who no one gave a fuck about, and
Yeah.
they just gave him this disease to see what would happen.
It's
Do you know what I mean?
It's totally brutal.
There was no consent given. There was no, you know, no payment for experiments. They were given this without knowing to see what would happen. In some cases, they were given it via spinal tap. Oh, sorry, no, they weren't given it via spinal tap. That's completely wrong. They were given it, but then they were given at a later date a spinal tap to look for signs of neurosyphilis to see if it spread to their brain.
Yeah.
And like spinal tap in itself is quite dangerous. I only know because I had one. Because they basically like get right to the base of your spine, and you know it 1 sort of millimeter the wrong direction, and you're going to be paralyzed.
Yeah.
It's a diagnostic test, so it's not like an intrusive or operation or anything. But it, you know, we're talking 1932, so we're not talking of like the medical knowledge
Advancements that we got
now. Yeah, absolutely, mate. And it was offered as a special free treatment, and to see if the neurosyphilis, the syphilis had spread to neurosyphilis.
Yeah.
So let's have a look at the study details. A Norwegian study, which was in 1928, so like 4 years, 4 years before, had reported that there was a pathological manifestations of untreated syphilis in several hundred white males. This was basically a problem for people of that time, so they needed to come up with a solution of how to combat that issue. I'm assuming because there was a lot of sort of, you know, everything was not as clean back then, was it? But there was a lot of prostitution and things like this. So you can easily see with that and like living standards of 1932 to now, how things could spiral and how things could, you know, things like syphilis and other sort of diseases could spread fairly quickly. But instead of sort of trying to get on top of it and treating the white males and education or whatever else they needed to do, they thought that the best idea was to infect a load of poor black people and watch what it did. And I still find it, you know, even though, you know, I don't know any of these people, I have got, you know, I know links to it, no nothing. I just find it quite disturbing that there's human beings willing to do it, mate. Just poor people. And it goes back to what we were just saying about the homeless people. People, you know, how many homeless veterans are there in America? Millions.
Like, don't get me wrong, you will have some people who will totally want to do it for scientific research, but you're going to have a shitload more who'll do it just for money and not realise what they're doing.
Oh yeah. It's like, what you do really, it's like if there was people at that time who'd say, look, yeah, give it to me and pay me, you know, pay me a wage for the time I've got it. Is it okay then? I don't know.
What do you do for a living, mate? Got syphilis.
Yeah, I got syphilis. It's just madness, isn't it? But like, that's not what happened. They weren't willing participants.
No.
So by the end of the study in 1972, only 74 of the test subjects were alive, of the original 399 men. 28 had died of syphilis. 100 were dead of related complications. 40 of their wives had been infected. 19 of their children were born with congenital syphilis. The Tuskegee University Legacy Museum has a display check issued by the United States government on the behalf of Dan Carolis to Lloyd Clements Jr., a descendant of one of the study participants. Lloyd Clements Jr.'s great-grandfather, Dan Carolis, and his two uncles, Ludi Clements and Sylvester Carolis, were in the study. The original legal paperwork for Sylvester Carolis related to the syphilis study is on display at this museum as well. So, like, in fairness, they have tried to, like, compensate the families afterwards and make it right.
Only because they got caught.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Let's make no mistake. If they could have got away with it without it coming out and without having to pay or like own up to it, they would have. Make no mistake. Jesus, yeah. But you know, at least I suppose they're trying to no, fuck them. Not at least we shouldn't have done it. They picked on people less fortunate themselves and poor, and you know, let's be frank, mate. They did it and they got away with it because black people were second-class citizens at that time. Yeah. No one gave a shit, or very few people gave a shit what was happening in the black community. Yeah. They didn't care if they were sick, ill, whatever, as long as they were serving them in their houses and their diners or whatever.
But the best thing was these black people were soldiers who'd enlisted into the army to help defend their country. And this is how they get treated.
The thanks they get, mate, isn't it? It's so Bill Clinton on the 16th of May 1997 formally apologized, held a ceremony at the White House for the surviving study participants. He said, what has been done cannot be undone, but we can end the silence. We can stop our heads turning away, and we can look at you in the eye and finally say, on behalf of the government and the American people, what we did was shameful and we are sorry. To the African-American citizens, I am sorry that your federal government orchestrated a study so clearly racist. Yeah. You know, 5 of the 8 study survivors attended the ceremony. And yeah, you know, these things like this and MKUltra and some of the other things, which we're going, like I said, we're being quite general now because we're going to go into a lot of these things in certain cases, you know, bit by bit and person by person next week. It's a lot of the reason that we know so much about MKUltra experiments is because they were stuff was declassified in, I think it was 1973 off the top of my head, and I've lost the bit where it says, yeah, it's a lot. It was declassified, which meant that although not strictly true, it was declassified in 1973, but before they declassified it, they ordered that all documentation was destroyed. So, well, by the time it was declassified in, I think it was 1973. I'm just going to just check that now. There was only bits left. So, yes, they declassified it. Yes, we were able to learn that it was true and it was real. But they did try to destroy the evidence first, which is, you know, shocking.
The mad thing is, they obviously destroyed a lot of evidence, and they would have destroyed the worst of the evidence. What we know about, even probably the worst of the experiments.
No, it's the stuff that they don't mind us using. But been since it was all, or since it was declassified, there's been 4,000 new documents requested. Sorry, I got the dates wrong, mate. The CIA Director Richard Helms ordered that all files were destroyed in 1973. And then it was declassified in something much later than that. I got those dates wrong, so I apologize. I can't find them.
I'm sure we can forgive you this once, mate.
Yeah, I'm normally pretty good with my facts and my dates. And now I can't fucking find it when the pressure's on. Yeah, they're just bastards, mate, all of them. They're just the government.
It's just vicious, isn't it?
Yeah, it is like it's brutal and like raw and just not good. Like this, and I sort of looking forward now. I'm glad we're going to do it that way and go into the nitty gritty of it and get into some of the people who've spoken out about the stuff that happened to them, because it's a bit easier to explain. Like I know we tend to flit around a bit, and I'm going from bit like something will remind me of something and this and that. So the first details started to be coming out in 1975, 2 years after they were ordered to be destroyed. So you'd imagine that when people were destroying them, people were coming across, like documents and stuff and reading them or whatever and thinking, fucking hell. And then stuff started to leak out. So yeah, in 1975, they spoke about it in Congress, and it's all a bit messed up.
But most of it was already deleted by then.
Yeah, well, it seems they ordered it to be destroyed in 1973. It lasted from 53 to 73, and then in 73 they said that all the documents should be destroyed. And then it became public in 1975 during a congressional investigation into what had gone on. It's worrying, isn't it?
Yeah.
That they were able to get away. Like that's the syphilis experiment. What did I say? 40 years? From the start of Project Artichoke to the end of MKUltra was like 50. No, what was it? 52 to 73. 30 years. Imagine the people who died, damaged, and just disappeared in that, in those projects.
Yeah.
Just chucked to the side, no use anymore because they're mentally broken or dead or no use, didn't work, couldn't take the torture, whatever it may be, cast aside. Next. It's upsetting, mate, and worrying. So that's the general MKUltra. Next week we will be back with individual cases and people who've talked about actually, what they went through or what they witnessed or what they did in some cases. I'd be quite looking forward to going through them, mate.
Yeah.
It will be quite brutal, but all the same, I think it's important to talk about, and it's good fun to talk. I say good fun. It's interesting. It's interesting stuff, mate. Conspiracy theories.
It's an interesting. Yes.
And like with these now, especially when we get into the cases, we're going to go into stuff like the Manchurian Candidate and all that type of jazz, which we're going to do a show on that separately anyway, because it's one of my favorites. But, we're going to touch on those other conspiracy theories alongside.
Yeah.
Because of this, just because of the stuff they do, and it's all linked in some way or shape or form. Okay, guys, you can find Rhys on Twitter at SureCeltic. You can find me at acecast_nation. You can find me on Facebook, facebook.com/acecastnation. Give this video a like and a thumbs up and share. Tell your friends about all the shows and series we've got on the site. We've got audio of all 50 plus shows. Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts. I can't think of any more. Lots of others. You can find audio, video of all the stuff. We've got social media exclusive videos, shorter videos as well. The quickfire questions, and I might have a new mini series coming as well, which will be a shorter form shows, interviewing different guests and hearing their stories about the good old days of football fandom, football casuals, should we call them? And I'm quite looking forward to that, speaking to some, probably for some people, familiar faces. For other people, there'll be new faces. But one thing's for sure, their stories will be very funny, very interesting, and probably a bit rude. Thank you for listening, guys. Thank you for watching, guys. Thank you for joining me, Rhys. And we'll be back next week for MKUltra Part 2.
No star.